I think I was able to find self-healing and self-improvement way faster just through, like, wanting to feel better and then being able to talk about it. It gave me a voice, and then it gave other people voices.
One of the reasons that art and creativity are so essential and important to the human experience is because they can quite literally give voice to the voiceless. How? I see it happening in two ways. One, artists can create art that speak to the plight of an oppressed or marginalized group. Artists like Ai Weiwei, Pussy Riot, and Banksy. These are some of the more well-known artists whose art is known for speaking up for groups who might not have a voice. And the other way in which art gives voice to the voiceless is very much in the individual sense, where I might not have the words to express what I need to express, and art allows me to communicate when words fail me. This is actually a theme that came up in the first episode of this podcast with Zach Herbert.
Art therapy is successful in the way that there are people who it cannot be transformed into a language. I know people who it is an incredibly painful experience for them to try and change an image-based experience or a sensory-based experience into a language-based experience.
So there's that aspect of art, giving voice to the voiceless. And there's something about the sharing of art in a group setting. Another thing that was touched upon in the first episode with Zach.
Like, vulnerability is so important in art because being vulnerable within the context of a collective group of people allows us to normalize what is human. And so much of that is bizarre and uncomfortable.
These are the themes that resurfaced in my conversation with Amanda Stelling in the following episode. Amanda reached out to me after hearing a few of the early episodes and wanted to share that she had went through a pretty intense experience in college and processed it with her photography. And through her sharing of her photography, was actually able to find some really deep connection and support because of it. And it took a lot of courage and vulnerability to do so.
That's what made it worth it. And that's why it's one of the most successful projects I've had, because it's continuing on, not about the photography, not about the art, but about creating a space to talk about it.
So I asked Amanda to come on the show and tell her story. And through her sharing her story, which I fear is not a unique story, it might spur even more connection in the future, and hopefully open up more pathways to understanding for anybody willing to listen with an open heart. My name's Joey, and you're listening to This Naked Voice. Well, welcome to This Naked Voice. We have with us Amanda Stelling. Amanda, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I'm really happy to have you here, and I'm thrilled to see where this conversation goes today with you. And I want to just give you the floor right now to tell us a bit about you and who you are and how you came to be here now.
Yeah, so I'm Amanda. I was born and raised in Sun Valley, Idaho. Big time skier. And then I went to school for the fine arts of film and photography at Montana State University in Bozeman. And I specifically had a project that when I listened to your podcast that I thought might be fitting and sent you an email, and here we are.
Yeah, I was surprised to get an email from you. Because we know each other a little bit. We did some creative projects a few years ago with some friends.
Yeah, that's right.
But we haven't had too much interaction beyond that, and so I was surprised to get that email from you. And I thought it was really brave of you to reach out and offer to share what you're intending to share today and follow up. And everything that you talked about in your email to me, I thought is really appropriate to the theme of the podcast around creativity, connection, and vulnerability. And so before we kind of dive into your story, just a personal curiosity, what was it in whatever podcast, whatever episode you're listening to that resonated with you in those episodes that compelled you to reach out and to want to speak out?
It just seemed fitting, I guess. I mean, kind of as cheesy as it is, it was kind of meant to be. I saw that you were doing the podcast, that you were doing the personal coaching. So you've been kind of in the back of my mind, like on social media. I saw those ads, and then I listened to the first episode with Zach, and just some of the stuff that you guys were talking about vulnerability, and then I think specifically about healing through art was I feel like the photo project I have really speaks to that, just healing through art and using it as a tool, and then also using art to create a space for community, for communication, for connection.
That is such an important role that art plays in our society. Art is such a healing modality for people who engage with it, and it can be something that brings people together to deepen connection. And I think Zach even mentioned that in the first episode. We have concerts where people they have permission to collectively feel something together. And so the performing artist is offering something, whether it's a musician or whoever, and everyone in the audience just has permission to feel together and experience this together. And whether they choose to, personally engage about it is something else, but art allows for that. So I love that about it. And I think that's at least what I heard you say in your statement.
And then my project too, it's just kind of like the literal interpretation. I think, music is you can feel it how you feel it, and so many people are going to listen to the same song and see it differently, where my project is a little bit more specific and kind of has a literal version meaning of that.
Yeah. So let's get to it. I'm curious. I'm anxious to give you the floor and to tell your story and tell about what's happened since then. I just want to leave space for you to share. So the floor is yours.
Okay. My story that relates to the photo project I did in turn was I was at a college party in Bozeman. There was a whole bunch of people there. There was a whole bunch of people that I knew, that I trusted, and I was in a bathroom, and 3 guys tried to break down the bathroom door and get to me. I tried to leave through the window. I tried to leave. There was another door, but that was locked. I tried to break that door down. They ultimately got in. They broke the door down, and it hit me over the head. And then it also resulted in like permanent nerve damage on my forearm. So like still to this day, I sometimes randomly drop stuff.
Did they grab you on your arm?
So no, I'm not sure what exactly happened. I know the door hit me. I went down to the ground. I don't remember like hitting my hand at the time. And then kind of the next thing I remember was just running, just got the hell out of the house. I got past the guys, called my friend. He came and picked me up like pretty far down the street. And then I knew at that time, this was like, I guess my second concussion, that this was a really bad concussion, that I'd been hit in the head really hard. I knew I couldn't go to sleep. And so one of my friends who had also picked me up that night, we went on the internet, and I knew one of the guys, he had a very specific look. And so I spent the entire night on the Montana State roster for the football and the basketball team. I wasn't sure which it was. I think it ended up being the football team. So 3 guys from the football team, and I spent the whole night, like, trying to identify them because I knew, 1, I couldn't go to sleep, and I knew, 2, that if I did go to sleep, I might not remember who they were or what had happened. Um, so then it kinda just took a couple days to process. I had called some people from the party who were there and got some phone numbers and got some more information. And then I went to the Voice Center, which is like the victims advocate group in Bozeman, and met with them, and kind of telling them what happened was the first time I realized that this was a lot worse than I thought it was, that these guys were not trying to attack me, not trying to go to the bathroom, um, that they were trying to rape me. Um, and then the victims advocate helped me report it to the police. And we went over to the police station, and what I got back was, at the time, to me, really surprising. The cops asked me if I was drinking, and that was basically the end of the conversation. Out of all the first and last names and phone numbers and people at the party, they had contacted one person. They didn't do any investigation into what happened, into who these guys were. Um, that ended up going through the school more than the police. So I left the police station just like pretty appalled at what happened. And luckily, I had gone there with an advocate. So she helped me like talk to the police and kind of finish that up. And then she left pretty pissed. She left kind of fired up. I was still like so concussed that I wasn't processing a lot of these feelings.
Mm.
I wasn't very mad. And then that was truly the end of the police statement. They told me that even if they found the guys, that the most that they would charge them with is a misdemeanor or like a disorderly conduct.
Mm.
So like truly didn't even care. And I think the main reason I reported was I was okay ultimately, but one of the guys in particular was so violent and was so aggressive that I figured there was no way that this person had not been reported in the past.
Mm.
And if that's the case, then at least he's in the system now. And then turns out he's not, because he went to a different school under a football scholarship the next year. So I went through the dean at the school, and Montana State was a lot better than the police, only because the dean at the time was actually my freshman year, and this had happened right at the end of my sophomore year. The freshman year, he was my teacher. He was one of my professors in like writing or literature class. And I remember he told me, I believe you because I know you. If anybody else had come in here, I'm not sure I'd be so sure to believe them.
Ooh.
Because apparently people accuse the football players of this type of stuff all the time.
That's a
So like
weird,
again,
twisted statement.
oh,
Uh,
And I was so like looking back on it, it's so funny. I was just so concussed. Like I didn't even pick up what that statement truly meant at the time.
God.
You know? They had told me that they kicked him out of school, and then I saw him like later in that semester, which was just at the end of the year. Um, and then it turned out that he had gone to a different school on a football scholarship. I had found that out later. So not only was he not punished, he was rewarded.
No big deal. Just go to a different school, get paid to go there.
Mm-hmm. So then I had my mom came out. I said, I need some help. I'm having a hard time. And I was having a hard time remembering to eat. I mean, it was, I ended up getting a diagnosis of a TBI, which is a traumatic brain injury.
Ooh.
Um, and so she came out. She was supposed to be there for the weekend, and my amazing roommates let her stay for, I think it was like 20 days. Um, and she helped and took care of me. And uh, I finished most of my finals. A lot of the professors were really flexible. They understand concussions. But one of the finals I still had to take was my photography project. And technically, I had already done and completed and finished my photography project. And every bit of my bones told me I needed to tell this story through photography.
Mm.
And I did, and I presented it in front of my class. And it was like one of the scariest things because it's not only such a personal project, it's self portraits.
Yeah, when you say you're telling the story, it means you took photos. You did there's essentially a self-portrait project about this incident.
Yes, exactly.
And you did. I'm just trying to understand the timeline. The incident happened. You had the concussion. You were finishing up finals, and this photo project. You decided to do this at the end of the same semester in which the incident happened.
Yeah, so it happened April 1st, which is April Fool's Day, um, which is kind of like, was this a joke? Is this a dream? It was kind of perfectly fitting. Um, and then school ended like right at the end of April.
Mm-hmm.
So finals were. So yeah, I got the concussion. Basically, 20 days in was when all my finals and photo projects was all due, and it was one of the most successful projects I've ever done, in the sense, like, the victim's advocate, the Voice Center, still wants to hang the photos every year, and it's, like, as intense as that experience was for me, doing the project and then being able to talk about it through photography opened up a door in a way that I had never expected or dreamt was possible.
When we spoke briefly before we started recording, and you had indicated that obviously this incident was significant and traumatic. And you also said that at this point in your life, the incident so much is not so important. It's about what's happened since then and how you dealt with it, how you told the story, and what telling the story has enabled you to do and what has enabled you to receive because of how you told your story. Is that accurate?
100%. When I got back home to the valley and since, through the treatment of the police and just I was so shocked. I know now, we know that this happens, that that's why the Me Too movement was so important, but it really does happen. and it's not talked about.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we are still shocked when we expect help from the people who are supposed to help us, and we don't get it.
Yeah.
I say we, but being a man, I don't know what that's like. But I've heard the same story from a lot of the women in my life, and you're not the first, second, third, or fourth woman who's told me a story like this, and how their interactions with law enforcement has been similar.
So I think like through that horrible treatment, I was pissed. And I was talking about it and I was telling my story and I was still like feeling funny because of the concussion. But the amount of people who told me their story back was amazing. And I'm so grateful that people feel comfortable, one, talking to me. It's not something that everyone wants to bring up on a daily basis. But at that time, it was like I heard story after story after story of the same thing. And that's what made it worth it. And like that's why it's one of the most successful projects I've had, because it's continuing on, not about the photography, not about the art, but about creating a space to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I think like because I wasn't raped, that does give me a little bit more freedom to talk about it, because I know a lot of women are clouded with shame, or even if it's not shame, it's still so beyond shitty, I can't imagine. So I have that balance of going through this scary trauma with also coming out of it on the other end. Therefore, I'm able to talk about it.
Hmm. Yeah, you're speaking to art as a doorway into connection, right? Here's my story, and people receive it, and then they can share their story, and that, you said, brought you closer to other people,
Mm-hmm.
right? That came because you shared your story in a creative way.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a few different questions I want to direct at you and see what comes up for you.
Yeah, shoot.
This incident happened to you. You chose to tell about it through your photos. If you didn't tell it through your photos, if you just started telling people what happened, right? Maybe got a couple of women together and just told them about it. That's an option, right? There are support groups of all different kinds. How might that have been different for you? What is it about the creative process that makes it different for you, as opposed to just telling the story?
I think, one, I was in a weird denial / confusion. I mean, I was so, just looking back on it now, it's like so cloudy, just kind of like spotty memories. But it's something down to my core that I knew I had to do. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really know what the photos were going to be. I I didn't know, except I knew I had to do it. And like it weirdly worked out that I was in finals, and this project had a place to go. And then it went through critique and I showed all my classmates. And even if I had done a photo project, I don't think it would have been received the same way if I wasn't in school, in college, around my peers, who a lot of them are all going through the same thing.
So your audience made a difference, is what I'm hearing here.
Yeah, I think in this case.
I'm curious. What I'm trying to get at is, if you didn't choose to tell your story through photos, if you didn't use that as the medium, if you never had the opportunity to, if you never even had the thought to tell them through photography, how would you have processed it?
I I don't think I would have.
Why not?
I don't know. I think, I mean, one, photography is my medium, it is my art. So I don't really know what other outlet besides traditional therapy maybe that would have let me process that and heal in the same way. And photography, I don't I think I think I would have. I take that back. I think I would have absolutely, but it would have taken a lot more time where when I did the photo so fast, I just kind of skipped this level of processing and I kind of went straight into the healing. Where I think if I didn't have some type of art, it would have been 4.5 years of therapy to get to where I am now.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, art and creativity, I know, allows me to connect more deeply with myself and process emotions much more efficiently than without it. It's just a fact of my life. And I think that's the way for a lot of people. And I think, again, this goes back to something that Zach and I were talking about. I don't know if I included it in our episode or if it was in another section of it, but at some point we were talking about the fact that some people don't have access to the right words.
I know people who it is an incredibly painful experience for them to try and change an image based experience or a sensory based experience into a language based experience.
Words don't work for people all the time,
I
right?
was just thinking that, like, this is the total subconscious. That's why I felt it in my bones. I didn't have the words.
Yeah. And it seemed like for you that photography made sense. You felt the way to communicate was through images,
Mhm.
and quite literally photographic images for you. You knew what to
Mhm.
do. You knew how to communicate in that way. I mean, so it makes total sense to me. I wanted to hear from you what it meant.
Looking back on it now, I think just that level of subconscious that you don't always have access to and just putting it on paper.
Yeah. So there's like there seems to be a two-part process here for me, and it seems like for you too, and maybe for other creatives. There's the creative process which helps me understand and process whatever's going on, whether it's just a day-to-day existence or a traumatic event, right?
Mhm.
There's that. And then the second part is the sharing. So I go through it. I go through an incident in my life,
Mhm.
and then I can go through a creative process to understand what that means and feel my emotions. That might be enough for me to understand what all that means and what significance it plays in my life. But then the second part is about sharing it.
Yeah.
I might not want to share it. It might be only for me. But it might be necessary for me to share it then to really have the healing come full circle.
Mhm.
Which it sounds like for you, I want to know, was that an important part for you? Because, like, if you had just done the photo project and then said, oh, done, would that have been enough? Or was the sharing really the important part?
The sharing was a huge part of it. And I was not consciously like looking to share or talk about it. That was just a byproduct of the product, the project. So, I mean, I was so angry that I wanted to talk about it. But yeah, then the sharing and the communication was just what everyone humans are looking for was that we're not alone. You know, whatever tragedy you're going through, you're not alone. Like, we're all kind of part of this human experience. I think on a fundamental level, we all want to love and be loved. And how you get there is through talking, is through communication, creating bonds, and just being part of this collective human experience.
What do you feel now when you tell your story and someone tells you theirs?
Mad. I'm still mad. Um,
You say
I
that
think
with
of
a chuckle. What's that about?
well, I think of there's a poet, Sarah K Key, and a line in it is no matter how far apart you spread your fingers, you'll never be able to spread your hands wide enough to catch all the pain you want to heal.
Because no matter how wide you stretch your fingers, your hands will always be too small to catch all the pain you want to heal. Believe me, I've tried.
I did not nail that, but more or less that's how it goes. And it's just like when someone tells their story, you just want to throw your arms around them and tell them it's going to be okay, because it will be. And sometimes, I mean, there's a lot of people doing that for me as well. I get mad about all the pain I can't heal, but also knowing that we're all in it together helps. I think I was able to find self-healing and self-improvement way faster just through like wanting to feel better and then being able to talk about it. And not just this event, just emotions in general. As we were talking earlier, it gave me a voice and then it gave other people voices.
So where can people find your photography online now?
Ooh, yes, building the website right now, but I'm feeling really close to being done. So that'll be amandastelling.com. And then my Instagram is Steel Skis. That's STEELSKIS.
Awesome.
I think it's really important that you are having these conversations and starting these conversations to inspire. At least for me, it was super inspiring and kind of sparked that creativity when it just feels a little hopeless.
I really appreciate you being here. I want to just honor your courage for telling your story and for being willing to share it so openly.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here. This is really exciting.
Well, I'm sure we'll talk again real soon. And I hope you have a great rest of your day, Amanda.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Talk to you in a bit, love.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
I'm not really sure how to wrap up this episode. I mean, there's a lot of different points touched on. Amanda talked about the assault in college, the actual incident, and she talked about how her photography helped her heal from the process. And she also talked about how the group support, how sharing her art really helped bring her closer with the community and understanding that we're all human and we all go through different traumas at different times in our lives. And getting to share our human experience with each other helps in the healing process. But there's also this other obvious side to this whole story that leaves me angry, sad, and really uncomfortable as well. And that's the whole side about how men do play such a violent role in these incidents. And we probably know only a fraction of the truth about these incidents and how they've affected other women and how they've affected children, not to mention other men, and how they've affected our planet. And this violence doesn't always show up just as physical violence. There's emotional abuse, there's mental manipulation, there's neglect. There's all sorts of ways in which this violence shows up. So the question is, what do we do about it? And part of the reason that I speak to vulnerability so much is that I believe that the lack of cultural acceptance of vulnerability in our young boys has to in some way be related to the violence in our men. And while that doesn't excuse any of the behaviors at play now, hopefully it gives us an area of focus to look at to make a better future moving forward. But none of us can, quote unquote, fix a culture single-handedly. though I do have a responsibility as an individual and as a man to look at what role have I played in the past and what role do I have to play now and in the future. I think a big part has to be around accepting the idea that it's okay to be flawed. And just because I'm flawed doesn't mean I won't be worthy of love or belonging. I think so much of the violent behavior comes as a reaction to this idea of a fuck it sort of mentality to nobody's gonna love me and I don't belong anywhere, so fuck it. Who cares what happens to others? I also need to know that even if I can't change my past, I need to be open to hearing the impact that I've had on others. And if I want to create a better world, I need to show that I'm willing to learn from my mistakes and be more conscious and change my words and actions moving forward into the future. We've all been wounded in some way in our lives, and at some point, I'm sure that all of us have wounded someone else. And if we haven't, then at some point, we will. It's just a fact of being human and being in relationship. Vulnerability is so essential to our sense of connection and belonging as humans, both in the way of asking for acceptance in being imperfect and flawed, and also in the way of asking for help when life gets hard and when I need some healing, when I've gone through something traumatic. For now, I suppose my invitation is to see how art and creativity might foster more connection in your lives. See how it might help you process whatever's going on and share it with somebody. Ideally, it helps you find your voice and find some more connection in your life. Thanks for listening to this episode of This Naked Voice. If you like what you hear, subscribe to the podcast. If you can, leave a 5-star rating and review. It helps us get found more easily on all the podcast sites. If you have any questions or feedback, you can reach me at info@thisnakedvoice.com. You can check out the website, thisnakedvoice.com, and find me on Instagram, thisnakedvoice. And I hope to have you back next week. Until then, be good to yourself.